It was terrifying questioning your belief system.
Yeah.
Because it formulates your sense of self, your sense of belonging. Everything is tied up into your whole entire identity, you know? And like I said, you're taught that that's where safety is. And beyond that, it's not safe. But you, not only at that same time when you're like unraveling and confronting all of this, and you're trying to like rebuild your identity and your sense of self, basically reconstruct your whole entire world, you're also having to fear the judgment of other people.
Free to be me, free to sing, sweet feathers envelop me like a hug.
The Safe to Be Seen podcast is intended for educational and entertainment purposes only. Darci and Brandon Burke do not claim to be experts. We have no intention to defend our beliefs or impose them onto others. This podcast provides a space to allow for us to share with others what it's like to be us. We desire to share our human journey with others. We advise you to seek professional counsel, therapy, and/or treatment from trained, credentialed, and certified professionals for any emotional, mental, and/or physical conditions you may be experiencing.
Hello, welcome to another episode of Safe to Be Seen. I'm Darci, and this is Brandon, and we're excited to have another conversation today. So this morning, when we were on our way home from the gym, you had pointed out to me that I had missed that I had some hairy armpits.
Oh,
I'd missed a patch of hair. And it made me laugh because it's like so indicative of our marriage. Where like I have paid no attention to detail and you pay so much close attention to detail and how that's been like a this like underlying joke. Yeah. Ever since we were first married. Like I think about like even you know, when I was well, I still do this now when I go shopping. And what do I do?
Oh, you know, when Darci, let's just say Darci's buying cottage cheese. There are several varieties of cottage cheese. Low fat, all sorts of different, you know, and they're just, for Darci, it's just cottage cheese. So she just reaches in and grabs a cottage cheese and sometimes brings home something that maybe is a little less desirable than what we wanted, you know? But like, yeah, it's a beautiful thing about you though. Like, trust me, it's oftentimes a curse for me that I pay so much attention to detail. Like it's, you're the yin to my yang, you know? Like it's a beautiful thing. We balance each other out really well, I think.
Yeah, we do.
And I think I'm wired that way, yes. But also, like, I was trained to be that way too because of my profession. My profession demands that I pay very close attention to detail. Well, yeah. So,
and it's good that you're that way for that profession, for sure.
But sometimes it's like, I wish I could turn that off. But you know, this morning when we left the gym and you had your little sports bra on or whatever, and you lifted up your arm, I was like, oh, there's some hair.
Listen,
did you see you had some hairy armpits?
Sometimes the mechanics of being a human is rough.
Yeah.
Maintaining
There's
that.
a lot of upkeep, especially for you beautiful women, unfortunately.
But it just made me laugh because it made me think about like just the dynamic of our relationship, you know? And I remember when we were first married and we needed to buy a vacuum. And I was like, let's just go to Walmart and just like buy the cheapest vacuum that's there, you know? And I think you spent like 3 weeks researching the best vacuum for the best dollar to buy, which is, there's nothing wrong with that. Like there's good to that too.
Yeah.
You know, but we're so different that way.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah. And, it made me think about like, because I don't pay attention to detail, I feel like I have a lot more embarrassing experiences in my life than you do. Because you're a little bit more like, you know, aware.
Well, I wouldn't say aware. I'm more probably strategic and like always planning and always preparing. Unfortunately, like I said, it's not definitely not always a good thing.
Yeah. But there is one story about you though, where
Great.
it's so funny to me because you are so strategic. You're always like, you got this in your eye, or, just like even this morning, you were like, you've got this on your face, and like, you're helping me out. I need it. I'm glad. I'm grateful for it. But also a story from when we were, we'd only been married like a couple years, and we were up at school, Utah State at Logan, and we just got done eating dinner, and then we were meeting some friends for ice cream. Do you know where this is going?
Oh yeah, I'll never forget this story.
And anyways, I hadn't really been like, we'd been talking, but I hadn't really, because I don't pay attention to detail. I hadn't noticed anything.
Yeah.
And so we had gone in there, gotten ice cream with a big group of friends, and you'd been talking to them the whole time. And at one point, after we had been talking with them and hanging out with them for a while, you turned and looked at me and started talking to me, and you smiled big, and there was like a literal tree branch between your teeth.
Yes, vegetation stuck in my teeth.
And I was like, oh my gosh, babe, like you have this massive green leaf on your tooth. And for me, I was like, for stuff like that's so like normal for me, but it was so funny for me because for you, that's like, oh my gosh, like,
Yeah, that was definitely one of the more embarrassing moments of my life.
Yeah. And that's funny to me because for me, that would just been like, yeah, like that happens to me all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, that traumatized me though. Now I triple check, I triple check, make sure my fly's up. I got nothing in my teeth, no boogers, all the things.
That's good.
Yeah.
I need to be more that way. We balance each other out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for checking on me, babe.
Yeah. I mean, the truth is I envy you, like to not care about things like that. I do have to point out, very frequently, hey, Darci, you got a booger hanging out. But like, that's why we're a good team. We help each other out. Like you just get to live a carefree, just no worries life. And I'm there to rein you in when you need it.
Thanks, babe.
Make sure when you have a booger or when you have, something going on that you need to know about. So armpit hair, whatever it is,
Yeah, clothes on backwards.
Oh,
tags on my pants.
At least a couple times a month, Darci, you don't, I don't know, how do you not take the tags off your clothes? Like they're always there. Like
I don't know.
Shirts on backwards. Like
not shirts. I don't think I've ever put a shirt on backwards. Bras I have put on inside out. I put on.
You've had shirts on backwards.
I have.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's okay. No judgment. It's all good.
Anyways, that made me laugh this morning. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good story. Thanks for sharing.
Mm-hmm. So today, do you want to introduce what we're going to talk about today?
Yeah. So, in our first episode that we recorded, we kicked things off by discussing what our intentions are for doing this podcast. Why are we doing this podcast? And we kind of finished up that episode introducing where we would go next for today's episode, which is to discuss a little bit about the transition we experienced of leaving Mormonism. And as we do so, we want to remind you, the listener, that this is definitely not a podcast, another podcast. There are plenty out there about Mormonism. And certainly it's not our intention to discuss in detail the discrepancies, the problems, the historical issues, the doctrinal issues, whatever it may be surrounding Mormonism. That is not our intention, nor will we plan to do that. However, as we are doing this podcast with one of the main intentions to be to create a safe space for healing, a safe space to be seen, to tell our story, and for others to tell their story. Leaving Mormonism is a very, very big and impactful part of our journey. And so we wanted to today take the opportunity to talk a little bit about that part of our journey and how that impacted us and how that aided in our evolution and in our healing and in our growth and what we experienced. So the disclaimer we want to give is we are respecters of all persons, all beliefs. We, again, are not interested in shedding negative, shining negative light on anyone's beliefs, religious or otherwise. But we do want to tell our story.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah, we do.
So, Darci is going to, we're going to start with Darci, telling a little bit about her story, and how things evolved with her and her belief system from a spiritual / religious context. And then it'll probably, this episode will be broken up into 2 episodes, because our plan, kind of our thinking, is that Darci will talk about her experience first, and then I will talk about mine, and we'll see where it goes. But it will probably be broken up into 2 episodes. So, yeah. Sound good, Darce?
Sounds awesome.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Okay. So I guess, Darci, why don't you start things out by telling us where did things begin for you? What did it look like for you
Mm-hmm.
to go from a true believing, dyed-in-the-wool Mormon girl, born and raised in the Mormon faith?
Mm-hmm.
You come from pioneer heritage, right?
Mm-hmm.
How did it happen for you to leave that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there, but first I just want to say that, like, I don't claim to speak for the whole. This is my experience. This is, my story. And I recognize and realize that it's different from others, and that but that's okay. Like, I see that and I understand that. All I can do is tell my story, my experience, my perception, my views on things. And I'm not claiming that this is everybody's experience or everybody's the way that people have come to make it work for them. Like, all I can do is speak from my heart and my story and my experience. So, I think that for me, now looking back, I think the first moment in my life when I started questioning or started really thinking about the doctrine of the church was when our daughter, whom at the time she was like 13 years old, came to us and said, I don't believe in the church. I don't want to go to church anymore. I don't believe it. I have a really hard time with X, Y, and Z. I don't want to speak for her. I'm just speaking from my experience as her mother, her coming to me and telling me that and what that did for me. And it scared me. It scared me so bad, because my whole way of like parenting and teaching about God and teaching about the afterlife and everything was wrapped up in that. And I feared, what does this mean for her? I feared the path that she was going to go down because, Mormonism was my way of keeping us safe, of keeping my kids safe. It was wired into me that is the way that you have safety in your life. And so it brought up a lot of fears in me that I hadn't experienced before. And I think now looking back, it made me start to question just the doctrine around eternal families. And because if I now had a daughter who didn't believe and who didn't have anything to do with it, what did that mean for my eternal family? And then it made me start questioning, would God really separate my family because people in my family believe differently? And so I just kind of brushed it underneath the rug and just, kept with the, just have faith and everything will work out. It's going to be fine. Don't worry about it. Just keep doing what you're doing. Keep teaching her what you believe to be true. And I did. And it didn't stop me from believing, but I think it just planted this seed in me of would God really do that? Would he really separate my family if people in my family chose to believe differently, who decided not to participate in Mormonism, So that's how it started. It started for me there.
Yeah. I have a couple questions, if I may, about that part of your journey. I guess the first one I thought of is, I remember being taught and hearing from leaders in the church that, heaven forbid one of your children go astray. I just remember having this deep fear of that would be one of the worst things that could happen. When our daughter came to you at 12, 13 and expressed those feelings to you about her disbelief and just it not being for her, how did you feel in regards to that? Was it as terrible as perhaps we were taught that it would be to have a child not believe? Was it, what did you experience in that regard?
Yeah.
In comparison to what you perhaps thought that would look like.
Yeah. Well, I remember at first initially just experiencing a lot of fear of what does this mean? And what are we going to do? And what's going to happen to you? What choices are you going to make now that you believe differently? But, now looking back, it was it actually ended up bringing us so much closer and a lot more connected. And it took some time. I have some grief over initially how I responded to that. And we've had to do some healing work together in that. I wasn't seeing her. And I have a lot of grief over that. She just wanted to be seen, She just wanted to be understood. And my own fears were keeping me from really, really seeing her.
Besides the fears around what you could, I guess, tie directly to spirituality, like you mentioned, what does this mean for our eternal family? What does this mean for her spiritual progression, for her well-being spiritually or in other areas of life? Basically, how will she survive without the church? Did you, Darci, did you feel any fear or concern tied to judgment of how others would view you?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Because I no longer had this like perfect Mormon family. I no longer had this image of like, we're all in this together. I'm doing my part as a mom to teach my kids these truths. And oh yeah, I absolutely was tied up in like having this image of that we needed to be a certain way. And if we weren't, like, what would people think, you know? And yeah, that's a real thing. There's a lot to unpack there and a lot that, you know, I've had to grieve over, of just remembering like that time when I felt that, when I was so afraid of like what other people thought about my family, instead of like just being more focused on like how she was feeling. And it's not that like I totally disregarded her or like brushed her off, or it's not that we didn't make her feel accepted or loved, but I think that was like the underlying tone of like, because we didn't know how to handle that.
Yeah.
You're not trained in, you know, of course, always love, but it's like, it was hard for me to know how to navigate that, you know, because when we were raising our kids, it was like, we go to church every Sunday, like no questions asked. This is what we do. You know, we didn't really give them a choice in that, of like, we go to church on Sunday, you know, mutual activities every week. You weren't as stingent about it as I was when it came to like mutual activities, but I was like, no, this is what we do. Family home evening every week, you know? And so, yeah, that experience with her just opened up my eyes to, what that must, now I look back and I'm like, she's one of the bravest people I know. To be able to have the courage at such a young age to come to her parents and her community and her friends, that where it's all so deeply entrenched and integrated. And it's where you form your sense of belonging and your sense of worth. And to, you know, for her to have the courage to be able to express that. And, you know, she was solid in it too. She's my hero. I admire her so much. I couldn't have been able to do that.
Yeah, that's beautiful. You know? Beautiful. Thank you. That just shows, first, may I say you did a great job of handling it. Like, you know, I'm not trying to tell you how to feel. You know, you mentioned feeling grief, and that's fine, but you handled it beautifully. But to now hear how you talk about it and how you see her, that's beautiful to see, you know?
Yeah, it's really, like I said, I think there's so many fears around like what you spoke of, like this image of like, if they fall away, like everything's going to fall apart, and, you know, how is that going to affect your relationship? And it was like ultimately brought us so much closer together. And we can talk more about like the dynamics in our family now, and what has come from that, by just being authentic and just letting our kids express themselves authentically without fear of judgment, without fear of my parents still gonna like accept me and love me if I voice an opinion or a belief different than them, you know?
Yeah.
So that was tricky to navigate at first, you know? So yeah, I think that was the beginning of it just kind of planted this seed in me of wondering, you know, would God really do that? And do I really want to believe in a God that would separate families based upon belief? Because I'll choose my family any day.
Yeah.
Where they go, I want to be, you know?
Yeah.
So
Awesome. So that's kind of the beginning, the first seed planted, you'd say. But you kept your head down, stood in line like a good little soldier girl, and
yeah,
plugging along. And
yeah.
what would you say was the next thing that arose in your life that made you progress down the path of like eventually leaving the church?
Yeah. Well, I just want to say that like I had a good experience in Mormonism. Like I was happy, you know. I wasn't experiencing like while I was in it like a whole lot of cognitive dissonance. I was having a lot of awesome experiences, and I loved serving. I loved being a part of the youth groups. I loved working with the youth. I worked with youth groups like our whole entire, almost my own adult years in the church. And I love that. I was happy. Like I had a good, healthy experience, you know? But yeah, there were just little seeds being planted along the way that started just opening up my mind a little bit to thinking about things differently and seeing things differently. And then, so I think what really started it for me was when you started coming to me with questions that you were having, doubts that you were having, experiences that you were having. And, you know, in an attempt to like help you and to help find answers for you, it just started creating this dialogue between us of questioning things and learning things and that we hadn't known before. And just really starting to question, like, is this really true for us? You know, I'd never given myself the opportunity to like really sit down and like really think about like intellectually the doctrine and what it really meant. And I mean, I'd studied and I had, you know, but I just had when you're wired a certain way from birth to think and believe a certain way, and when you're wired from the time you're little to be taught, like your neural pathways are being developed based upon what you're repetitively hearing over and over and over again. And so you're wired to believe that safety is only found in this way spiritually. And that if you step outside of that, it's scary and it's not safe out there, basically, you know? And so when I say that I didn't, what I mean by that is that for the first time I was like kind of letting myself like go out of the reef, like beyond the pale.
Yeah.
And it was scary. Rebellious
Darci emerged for the first time ever. I can attest, you were so solid in that realm, in that Mormon realm. You were, you know, I mean, we joke, but like we went to church every Sunday.
Never missed.
Even on vacation, Darci would make sure we sought out a church. Come hell or high water, we were going to church every Sunday. So this was the first time in your life that you allowed yourself the freedom and the space to start looking, start reading, what how did that look? What did that look like for you?
Yeah, it just was, when you were coming to me with your concerns
Mm-hmm.
and your questions, I was like in attempt to like answer those questions for you. If I didn't know the answer myself,
Yeah.
then in an attempt to like help you and not like, I guess, prove you wrong or,
Yeah.
I started studying and reading more and, and just hearing stories that I hadn't heard before. And, you can get into like the nuances of church history and everybody has their way of reconciling it, which is fine. Like I know everybody has their perceptions on it and their views on it and the way that they've come to reconcile it and make it work. But for me, when I like really just started like looking into things, I was really uncomfortable with some of the things that I was reading and hearing about that I don't feel like I knew the full story of it.
Mm-hmm.
And, so then that made me start questioning, like, are these things really from God? And that just was terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
It was terrifying questioning your belief system.
Yeah.
Because it formulates your sense of self, your sense of belonging. Everything is tied up into your whole entire identity,
Yeah.
And like I said, you're taught that that's where safety is. And beyond that, it's not safe. It's not safe to explore that. And so yeah, for me, it was gaining a different perspective on some things in church history that once I kind of like allowed myself to think a little bit more critically about it, were not sitting well with me. And I think, ultimately, like looking back, I could have made it work. Like, and I've talked to so many people who feel the same way about church history, but they have found ways to make it work and to reconcile it. And that's great. Like I'm happy that they've been able to do that and maintain their membership in the church and participation. And I think I probably could have found a way to make that work. But there were a couple of things that happened that were just, after that, I was like, no, I don't think I can participate anymore. And so how that happened was, this was like a year. My deconstruction was like probably a year and a half of just a lot of studying, a lot of conversations, a lot of going inward, a lot of prayer, a lot of contemplation. And so going off of like how you at the same time, you were a little bit ahead of me in this journey. You had deconstructed a lot before I had, and you had come to our family. You got to the point where you just decided that you no longer could, I guess, like fake it, because you were going to church for a while and doing those things just to like maintain the image
and to support
and to
guys.
support me. Yeah.
You and the kids. I wanted to, be there.
Yeah. But you'd gotten to a point to where, it was getting to a point where you needed to tell the kids what you believed and that what you no longer believed, and have a discussion with them about why they might not see you at church anymore. Because we lived, for like, what was it, like 6 months, where it was kind of like a mixed faith, where I was still going and doing the church stuff, and I decided not to.
Mm-hmm.
We can talk about what that was like too, but yeah. So the two big kickers for me was after you'd come to the kids and told them that you no longer believed And that, if they wanted you to come to church, that you would, but if not, like, you preferred to stay home. And so after that, I just remember like thinking about what our kids would now think of you and how they would like just what they were thinking of the whole experience, and because our kids adore you and admire you, and when you raise your kids to believe a certain way and to find truth a certain way, and that there's only like one way to find that truth, then as a parent, when you step away, it just made me, I was just like really like worried about what they were now thinking of you, and how that was like disrupting, how that could possibly disrupt that relationship that they had with you. And with my son's permission, he's our youngest, so I was still like participating and going to church, and it was general conference time. And President Nelson was giving a talk at general conference. And I had brought Asher in the bedroom, or in the living room, asking him to come listen to this talk with me. And I remember him saying in his talk, don't take counsel from those who don't believe. And my heart just like sunk in my chest, because I looked over at Asher, and you had literally just come to our kids like a week or two before and told them that you didn't believe. And I was like, what am I doing? My kids should absolutely take into consideration what their dad has to say. I mean, that little guy adores you. And I didn't want anything coming in between that. Like the mama bear came out in me and like, no, I'm actually not okay with that. So I think after that, I'd already kind of been mentally out on a lot of things. But after that, I was like, I don't really want to be a part of something that's going to come between my family. And that type of messaging was coming in between my family, of not being safe to explore differences. And I didn't want to encourage that with my kids, of not taking counsel from their dad. So that was kind of like the line for me. After that, I was pretty much done after that. And later I found out that during that time, Asher was having a lot of anxiety. And I asked for his consent in sharing this before, because I don't want to share anything that, none of our kids are comfortable sharing. And I asked if it would be okay if I share this. But yeah, he was like, remember, he was like anxious a lot, and couldn't really pinpoint like why he was experiencing anxious behavior at that time. We had just moved, and so I thought it was like related to that, which maybe there was a little bit of that with it,
Mm-hmm.
But later he came to me one night and he just said, Mom, I need to tell you that, during that time when I was like having a hard time sleeping, and I was anxious a lot and wanted to be like in your guys' bedroom a lot with you. He told me it was because after, you had come and told our family that you didn't believe anymore, he started developing a lot of fear around what that meant for our family eternally. And he was so worried about not being with all of our family forever. And that broke my heart to hear. And I just realized, like, I don't think fear and God belong in the same sentence. You know? And I realized I didn't really want to teach God in that way to my kids, of having to fear that if somebody believed differently than them in the family, that they weren't going to be able to be with them, you know? And yeah, so that was like two really big things. I was like, I'm not okay with that. It was hard.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. That brought back a lot of memories of that time in our lives. It was really, really difficult.
It was so hard.
I mean, unfortunately, a lot of times, and I was on this side of the coin myself, of judging someone who stops believing or goes through a faith crisis or becomes inactive in their membership, or who doesn't, all variations of things, doesn't do their calling, or doesn't go to the temple, or flat out leaves the church. There's this judgment of like, oh, they're taking the easy road. Right?
Yeah, it is not the easy road.
Oh, they're weak.
Yeah.
Oh, darn it, they got deceived. Or, they just frankly want to sin. And I can't, like, you don't know what you don't know. Such a cliche, but so true. Like, I can't overemphasize the error of that way of thinking, at least as my lived experience. It was hell.
Yeah, it was so hard. And we, usually it's like the kids coming to the parents.
Yeah.
But for us, outside of our daughter, that it was us that was like having to go to our kids and be like, we need to talk to you guys about something,
Yeah.
That was hard because they'd already been wired into their system that what we were doing was wrong. And now we had to like rebuild that with them, of trying to show them like, no, it's okay. Actually, like, it was just such a unraveling and so much disharmony within, of figuring all this out and how to navigate it with our kids and with family. And we had a son on a mission when we were deconstructing, which has made it so much harder, especially you were the one that was mainly going through that during that time. We can get into that when you tell your story, but yeah, I don't think people, well, you don't know what you don't know and what you haven't been through, which is kind of one of our hopes with this, with telling our story, is to try to see people who are going through something like this.
Yeah.
Because like, we didn't intend on it happening. We had no ill intent with wanting to step away. But you, not only at that same time when you're like unraveling and confronting all of this, and you're trying to like rebuild your identity and your sense of self and basically reconstruct your whole entire world, you're also having to fear the judgment of other people and the fear of, are they still going to be my friend? Are they still going to still going to trust me? Is my community still going to accept me now that I believe differently? There's just so many fears related to this whole entire process.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just so hard.
Yeah.
It's so hard and so scary. All those things that you're having to confront. And yeah, it was such a challenging time. I think too, for me, I was fortunate because as I was deconstructing, I was also like rebuilding at the same time. It wasn't like I just left and I had no idea of like who I was or what I now believed who and what God was, or how I felt about my sense of self. Or I mean, I maybe went through like a little period of that, but I feel really fortunate that it wasn't as destabilizing for me as I've heard that it can be for some other people, because I was, as I was deconstructing, I was having other experiences outside of Mormonism with spirituality. And I was reading books from other spiritual guides, I guess you'd call them, and just reading books that I hadn't read before about spirituality. And it was just opening my eyes. It was just opening my eyes to spirituality in a different way. And that was really, really resonating with me, though. It was really, I felt more aligned with experiencing and practicing spirituality in that way. And so I kind of felt like I had a baseline to go off of when I finally decided to like fully step away. It wasn't really like it wasn't really about like rebuilding my sense of identity and my sense of self. It was, my big thing was just the fear of judgment and the fear of people thinking the devil has a grasp on me, and that I can't be trusted, that I'm, wanting to sin, and all those things that you fear that people judge you for,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I feared, a big thing for me is fearing like what my kids are going to think of me, because I taught them from the time they were little to believe a certain way and to think of God in this way, and of spirituality, like all the things, and I was really fearful of what my kids were going to think of me and how they were going to view me,
Yeah.
So there's a lot.
Yeah.
It's hard.
Thank you for sharing that. So, maybe speak to, if you don't mind, Darci, those, and you don't have to, say whatever's on your heart. You don't have to go long with it, but I think it might be helpful for couples who may listen to this. Maybe talk a little bit more about your experience, what you were feeling, what you were thinking when you saw me start to like look and read and investigate and deconstruct, and you saw like firsthand what I was going through.
Mm-hmm.
What was that like for you?
It was so many things. It was fear that you were being deceived, fear that you were being led astray, fear that you were going to take our family down a path that was going to lead us to unhappiness, and that fear that you were, tearing our family apart. So I had those fears. And then I also, like, watching you go through that was heartbreaking. And so I felt so much like empathy and compassion for you, because I saw how hard this was for you. And so I was having just so many mixed feelings and emotions going on inside of me. It wasn't like I wasn't mad at you. It was just more, I was just like afraid because I'd been wired to be afraid, basically, you know, and to fear the unknown.
Yeah.
But I think, well, I know that brought us closer together because we just, for a while there, it was like, well, I'm going to stay. I'm still choosing to stay as you left. And so then we had to figure out, well, how do we navigate that now that we have these different beliefs and these different ways of viewing the world? And but at that time, you weren't even settled on a spiritual practice. You were just kind of like, I don't know, you know, which was even more scary to me because I was like, what are we going to teach our kids? Like, what are we going to, it was just so many unknowns. That was so scary, you know? But I think it ultimately made our connection deeper because we loved each other beyond beliefs. And it was tricky there for a little bit. We definitely had our moments of, you know, frustration and fear and all those things that came up for us. But I think that that experience I know that experience ultimately just brought our family so much closer together. And it did because we were just allowing people in our family to be authentically them without fear. They were just, when we decided that you and we were just safe to be who we were outside of religious beliefs, spiritual beliefs, that wasn't going to come between our relationship, our family. And by so doing, it provided a space for our kids to feel that as well. And it didn't separate us. It brought us so much closer together. I mean, there was some tricky, like, you know, when our son got home from his mission, we had to have a lot of uncomfortable conversations. It was hard. It's hard because you don't want to disappoint anyone. You don't want to make anybody feel sad or upset or fear or worry, you know, and especially you don't want to do that to your kids. I didn't want to do that, you know, because you love them so much. But I mean, after, you know, getting through some uncomfortable conversations, and we just came to an understanding that it's okay. Like, our love is so much bigger and stronger than this hurdle we're overcoming. And, you know, it's changed the way that I think about parenting and the way that it's changed the way that I parent now, especially when it comes to like spirituality and beliefs of just trusting. I want my kids to be able to trust their inner knowing. I want that more than anything. And to not outsource that, but to learn to trust what their body is telling them, even if it's different than mine. And to be safe in that. And so now, like, when we sit around as a family and we talk about religion and we talk about spirituality, instead of like me and you sitting the kids down and telling them, this is what we believe as a family. This is how things are done. This is the way. We now just discuss a lot of different possibilities. it's so important for me now to my kids to develop that cognitive functioning of being a critical thinker and that skill of interoception, of being able to relate to what is happening in your inner world and trust that. That will serve them in so many different ways of their life. And it's been so fun. Like, it's been so fun just to like sit down with our kids and without no agenda, no judgment, just like, what do you think about this?
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel about this? And their answers have been amazing.
Yeah.
Like, I have learned so much from them by just letting them freely express what they feel and what they think without any judgment.
Mm-hmm.
That type of vulnerability with each other and openness and authenticity, it just, the byproduct of that is connection.
Yeah.
And a connection on a level that I hadn't experienced before. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so much, so many, a lot of hard,
Yeah.
a lot of hard and a lot of struggle and a lot of fear and a lot of pain.
Yeah.
But on the flip side of that has been a lot of beauty and a lot of connection and a lot of love in ways that I hadn't experienced before with my family.
Mm.
And this is just our experience. Like,
Yeah.
you know, I'm not saying that families in Mormonism aren't experiencing this. I'm sure they are. And I'm not taking that away from anybody. This is just my experience.
Yeah.
This is just how it happened for us.
Yeah. And speaking to your experience, Darci, in that regard of like, we're not interested in, again, we can't emphasize it enough. This is not about like specific points of doctrine or historical problems or necessarily like the weeds, if you want to say.
Mm-hmm.
Let's not get in the weeds. But I would like to, if you don't mind, I'd love for you to speak about some of what you now, today,
Mm-hmm.
things that you hold so dear and so true that for whatever reason, again, doesn't have to be everybody's experience, but for whatever reason, for Darci Burke
Mm-hmm.
in Mormonism, you didn't know. You did not understand. What are some of the things that as you are now on a new path
Mm-hmm.
of spirituality, of self-discovery, of evolution, of living your life,
Mm-hmm.
what are some of the things that we could say maybe you were blind to
Mm-hmm.
within Mormonism?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think one of the biggest things for me is the experience of being fully connected to myself and trusting my inner knowing and not outsourcing my spirituality has changed everything for me. I navigate the world so much differently now by gaining that ability to connect to myself on that level of trusting my inner knowing and that relationship with self. And now spirituality for me is just being in deep relationship with self, relationship with others, and relationship with the earth. And that is spirituality for me. Spirituality for me is being able to, connect with myself, trust my inner knowing so that I know how to guide my life, not based upon how other people think I should be living my life or their vision of what they think my life should be, but trusting my intuition and trusting my inner knowing of how my life should be guided. And actually, I wrote a letter that I would like to share because I've found I don't write a whole lot. I mean, I guess I am like writing a book now, but I found it to be therapeutic, like putting my thoughts into words, and especially like in discussing this huge pivotal point in my life, being able to like put my thoughts into words on paper and like see them has been healing for me. Because I've had these like, there's so much I gained from Mormonism that I'm so grateful for, and so much beauty I found in it. And there's also things that I feel like harmed me. And so being able to like put that on paper and write about it has been therapeutic for me. So I hope that's okay if I
of course
read that.
Please do. While you're getting that, I'll just tell our listeners that when Darci finishes reading the letter that she wrote, expressing some of her heartfelt feelings about this journey out of Mormonism, we will end this episode so it doesn't go too long, and we will transition right into the next episode. Will be me taking the opportunity to talk about my journey as it relates to leaving Mormonism. So yeah, Darci, whenever you're ready, if you want to
let me put on my gargles here,
read your letter, and then we'll finish up. Yeah, hey, that's okay.
Okay. To the church I once called home. There was a time when you were my home. You gave me language for love, eternity, and for belonging. You gave me songs that still echo in my bones, stories that shaped my childhood, and a structure that was safe. Through you, I married Brandon, my soul person, my lover, and my best friend. And that gave me my children, the 6 most important people in my life. Through you, I have had countless opportunities to serve and to be served by others. Through you, I have met some of the most amazing and loving people, friendships I cherish, and people that I deeply admire and esteem to be like. I am truly so grateful for all of that. This letter is not an attack. It is an exhale. It is the voice that I once silenced to stay accepted, and the voices of women who were never able to tell their story. Their stories live on in me and in the many others who have felt the depth of their wounds. I tell this for them. A God of love would never use the threat of salvation as leverage. Love does not manipulate or coerce. It invites and frees. Love is not a transaction. I tell this for the women who feel silenced and unseen. I tell this for the women who have ever felt fear or shame for wanting to expand their beliefs, to question, and to maybe leave, but who do not feel safe to do so. I see you. You taught me that goodness came through obedience, that womanhood was sacrifice, submission, and enduring, and that modesty was measured in inches. That revelation had to be mediated through men, and that divinity looked more like hierarchy than holiness. Leaving you rewired everything, not just my beliefs, but my nervous system, because fear was not just a doctrine, it was a sensation. The fear of being judged, the fear of being wrong, the fear of trusting my own inner knowing. But in all of that grief, I found God. not in a steeple, not in a temple, but in my breath. I met the divine not as something distant, but as the sacred within me. Leaving the church didn't make me lose my way. It led me back to the temple of my own flesh. I've met God through presence. I was told that if my truth was not in alignment with your doctrine, that I should fear it. My body, my intuition, my inner knowing is not the problem. It is the portal, the very place the divine has been whispering all along. I have come to the most sacred place I had been taught to mistrust, my body. She holds the wisdom, she carries the memory, and she's no longer asking permission or answering questions to be deemed worthy. You gave me a beginning, but I had to leave to remember who I really am. If the church truly desires to embody the love it teaches, it must begin by listening to those it has wounded, not to defend, not to debate, but to witness. Jesus, the very man the church worships, asked for witnesses to his own suffering. And perhaps one of the most profound things he taught was how to suffer and how to heal. In both, he asked to be seen. Everyone needs an empathetic witness to their story. When someone chooses to step away, they can be treated and labeled as broken, lost, deceived, or dangerous. This is not healing, and this is not love. What if they are not any of those things? What if they are simply choosing truth in the only way their soul knows how to follow it? The ruptures in relationships is not God's will. It's a byproduct of fear-based systems that reward sameness. Here are ways I invite the church to consider to help heal this space. Teach that unconditional love is not tolerating a loved one who leaves, but honoring their journey, even if it doesn't mirror your own. Discourage fear-based parenting. Love, acceptance, and worth should not be contingent on church attendance, worthiness interviews, missions, or temple marriage. And promote nervous system education within homes. Help families understand that rejection, control, and religious pressure create trauma responses like shutdown, anxiety, and disconnection. Safety, not shame, is what allows people to thrive. Encourage honest dialogue instead of silent disapproval. Curiosity does not mean compromise, and connection is more important than control. Shift the focus from bringing people back to keeping people close. Relationship is not a project. It's a sacred space where both people get to be seen, even in differences. Faith is not proven through conformity, but through the courage to love across differences.
So good. Thank you, Darci.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. That was beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me share that. It's taken some time to build up the capacity within myself to share my truth. I'm grateful I have the knowledge that I do now of the nervous system of how to be able to do that, of how to build up safety within myself to feel safe to be seen. But I know there's a lot of people who are struggling in this space and who fear the repercussions of speaking their truth. And I just want them to know I see them and I understand. And, and I just hope that through sharing some of our story and what that felt like and how people on both sides, those who are believing and those who are chosen to step away, can come together to help heal that space. That's my intent. That's my goal with sharing my story today, of finding ways to build that bridge so that people can stay connected and feel safe to do so.
So beautifully said. Thank you so much. I'm so proud of you. I love you.
I love you. Thanks, babe.
You're welcome.
Free to be me, free to sing sweet feathers envelop me like a hug, whispering melodies.
The Safe to Be Seen podcast is intended for educational and entertainment purposes only. Darci and Brandon Burke do not claim to be experts. We have no intention to defend our beliefs or impose them onto others. This podcast provides a space to allow for us to share with others what it's like to be us. We desire to share our human journey with others. We advise you to seek professional counsel, therapy, and/or treatment from trained, credentialed, and certified professionals for any emotional, mental, and/or physical conditions you may be experiencing.